In a world where power and wealth define status, Marcus Silva, a self-made black tech entrepreneur, attends a lavish gala hosted by Alexander Duarte, an arrogant millionaire who sees him as insignificant. What begins as an attempt to network turns into a moment of public humiliation when Alexander mocks Marcus's humble origins, unaware that Marcus is on the verge of a breakthrough that will change everything. With his new revolutionary technology set to disrupt the global market, Marcus's rise to the top begins. But as his power grows, so does his internal conflict. Will he seek revenge on the man who belittled him, or will he take a higher path? As the stakes intensify, Marcus must decide. Will he use his newfound influence to destroy Alexander, or offer him a lesson in humility that will shake the foundations of everything Alexander believes about power? Marcus Silva is a man marked by resilience. Born into a poor community, he has built his career through sacrifice and determination. But at a high society charity event, he is publicly humiliated by Alexander Duarte, an arrogant millionaire who sees him as insignificant. To Alexander, Marcus is just another nobody, someone he believes is outside his untouchable world of power and wealth. What Alexander doesn't know is that Marcus is about to change the game. His technology company is about to revolutionize the global marketplace, elevating Marcus to the status of the richest man in the world. As his astonishing rise transforms the economic landscape, Marcus is faced with a choice: seek revenge or something bigger. In an unexpected twist, Marcus uses his newfound power to turn the tables and acquire Alexander's empire, surprising everyone. But instead of destruction, he offers Alexander a lesson that will shake the foundations of everything he believes about power and success. Silent Ascent is an emotional journey about the struggle against humiliation and inequality, where the greatest victory is not financial, but moral. With complex characters and a plot full of surprises, this novel offers a profound reflection on what really matters in life, and how true power can lie in unexpected acts of compassion. Marcus Silva, a 40-year-old black man with a strong, athletic build. His deep brown eyes reflect wisdom and resilience, and his close-cropped hair is speckled with early gray. His face shows subtle signs of struggle, yet his posture exudes quiet confidence. Backstory: born in a poor neighborhood, Marcus was raised by a single mother who instilled in him the values of hard work and integrity. Despite facing systemic racism and numerous obstacles, Marcus built a successful tech company from the ground up. His humbling experiences fueled his drive for success, but it's the quiet dignity he carries that sets him apart. He's on the verge of changing the world and confronting a past that won't stay buried. Alexander Duarte. Physical description: a 45-year-old white man with slick, jet black hair and piercing blue eyes. Alexander has a tall, lean frame and an impeccably polished appearance. His tailored suits and manicured style showcase his obsession with control and superiority. Backstory: the son of a wealthy businessman, Alexander inherited his family's luxury hotel empire. He's never faced true hardship, and his privileged life has made him dismissive of those he deems beneath him. His ego blinds him to the potential in others, and his ruthless ambition drives him to humiliate Marcus, a mistake that will haunt him. Camila Silva. Physical description: Marcus's younger sister, a 35-year-old woman with a slender frame and natural curls that she often wears tied back. Her warm brown eyes are always alert, filled with quiet determination. She favors casual, understated clothing but carries herself with an air of elegance. Backstory: Camila is a lawyer and Marcus's biggest supporter. Raised in the same harsh environment, she became an advocate for social justice, using her career to fight against inequality. Camila has always believed in Marcus, but her own journey is one of finding her place in his growing shadow while maintaining her own voice and power. Sofia Duarte. Physical description: Alexander's wife, a 40-year-old woman with strikingly sharp features, blonde hair that falls in perfect waves, and a sophisticated style that exudes wealth and influence. Her hazel eyes often carry an air of detachment, hinting at her unhappiness. Backstory: married into wealth, Sophia has always played the role of the perfect socialite, but behind closed doors, she struggles with the moral compromises Alexander's world demands. When Marcus enters their lives, she begins to question her loyalty to a man whose arrogance blinds him, triggering her own emotional transformation. Henry Reynolds. Physical description: a 50-year-old black man with salt and pepper hair and a stocky build. His rough hands and deep-set wrinkles speak of years of labor. His soft-spoken demeanor contrasts his physical presence, and his kind, world-weary eyes often carry a smile. Backstory: Henry is a longtime mentor to Marcus and a former janitor who helped raise him when his mother was working multiple jobs. Henry taught Marcus the value of patience and humility. Now semi-retired, Henry remains one of Marcus's closest confidants, offering wisdom from his years of experience with hardship and prejudice. Marcus's tech headquarters: a sleek, modern office space located in the heart of the city's bustling business district. The building's glass exterior symbolizes transparency and innovation. Inside, it's a world of cutting-edge technology, with open-concept workspaces, minimalist furniture, and a buzzing atmosphere. The headquarters serves as the nerve center for Marcus's rapidly growing empire. Alexander's Luxury Hotel: the Duarte family hotel, located in an exclusive downtown area, exudes opulence. High ceilings, marble floors, and chandeliers adorn the main lobby. Alexander's private office is filled with extravagant art pieces, leather-bound books, and vintage furniture, emphasizing his wealth. This setting reflects the luxury that separates him from Marcus's humble beginnings. Marcus's childhood neighborhood: a working-class community filled with small, run-down houses, graffiti-stained walls, and overgrown sidewalks. Despite its appearance, it's a place full of heart, where neighbors support each other. The contrast between this setting and Marcus's current life reminds him of where he came from and the people he represents. The Gala Venue: a grand ballroom inside one of Alexander's hotels, featuring towering windows, shimmering chandeliers, and a polished marble floor. The attendees are the elite of society, draped in luxury. This is where the humiliating incident between Marcus and Alexander takes place, an extravagant, glamorous setting that highlights the stark inequality between them. Henry's modest home: a cozy, modest house on the outskirts of the city. The furniture is old but well-maintained, and the walls are adorned with family photos and memorabilia from a simpler time. Henry's home represents stability, wisdom, and the humble roots that have shaped Marcus's character. It's a place where Marcus finds solace and guidance. The Gala Invitation. Setting: Marcus's office. Action: Marcus receives an invitation to the prestigious gala hosted by Alexander Duarte. Camila encourages him to attend. Cause and effect: sets the stage for Marcus's entry into the elite world, leading to the conflict with Alexander. The arrival at the gala. Setting: Duarte Hotel Ballroom. Action: Marcus arrives at the event, feeling out of place. Tension builds as he feels the disdain of other guests. Cause and effect: Marcus's discomfort grows, foreshadowing his encounter with Alexander. The encounter with Alexander. Setting: near the bar. Action: Alexander publicly humiliates Marcus. Cause and effect: this moment of humiliation ignites Marcus's desire for revenge and drives his internal conflict. The aftermath and Camila's support. Setting: Marcus's car. Action: Marcus feels the sting of Alexander's words, but Camila encourages him to rise above it. Cause and effect: Marcus's internal conflict deepens, pushing him toward a calculated response. The decision to strike back. Setting: Marcus's home office. Action: Marcus decides to strike back through his business, researching Alexander's empire. Cause and effect: this decision sets Marcus on the path to dismantling Alexander's power, accelerating the project. Setting: Marcus's tech headquarters. Action: Marcus calls his development team, pushing them to accelerate the release of his groundbreaking product. Cause and effect: Marcus begins laying the groundwork for his rise in power, a key meeting. Setting: a private investor's office. Action: Marcus meets with a powerful investor, securing crucial funding to expand his project. Cause and effect: this meeting provides Marcus the resources he needs to challenge Alexander's influence. Camila's concerns. Setting: Marcus's home. Action: Camila expresses concern that Marcus's drive for revenge is consuming him. Marcus reassures her, but doubts linger. Cause and effect. Marcus is conflicted between ambition and morality, deepening his internal struggle. The market launch. Setting. Tech conference. Action. Marcus's new product is unveiled, receiving rave reviews and attracting attention from major corporations. Cause and effect. Marcus's success in the tech world puts him on Alexander's radar. A growing rivalry. Setting. Duarte's office. Action. Alexander, hearing about Marcus's success, dismisses him as a threat but orders his team to monitor the situation. Cause and effect. This rivalry begins to escalate as Alexander underestimates Marcus's rise. Marcus's next move. Setting. Marcus's office. Action. Marcus plans an aggressive business acquisition to challenge Alexander's dominance in the hotel industry. Cause and effect. Marcus's strategic mind drives him to diversify and further disrupt Alexander's empire. Alexander strikes back. Setting. Duarte's office. Action. Alexander launches a smear campaign against Marcus's company, aiming to damage his reputation. Cause and effect. Alexander's underhanded tactics escalate the conflict, forcing Marcus to defend himself. Marcus's public statement. Setting. Press conference. Action. Marcus publicly responds to the smear campaign, handling it with grace and poise, gaining more public sympathy. Cause and effect. Marcus's handling of the situation only strengthens his image and resolve, weakening Alexander's attack. The pressure on Alexander. Setting. Alexander's home. Action. Alexander faces pressure from his investors and wife, Sophia, who begins to question his methods. Cause and effect. The tension in Alexander's personal life mirrors the crumbling foundation of his empire. Marcus's moral crossroad. Setting. Marcus's home. Action. Marcus reflects on his goals. Camilla urges him to stay true to his values, but Marcus is torn between revenge and doing what's right. Cause and effect. Marcus's internal conflict deepens as he prepares for his next move. The strategic partnership. Setting. High-end restaurant. Action. Marcus forms a strategic partnership with an influential business mogul, further consolidating his power. Cause and effect. This partnership propels Marcus to a level of influence that rivals Alexander. Alexander's desperation. Setting. Duarte's office. Action. Alexander, now feeling threatened, makes a desperate move to sabotage Marcus's latest venture. Cause and effect. Alexander's desperation reveals the weakening of his empire and his own sense of control. Scene 3. Sophia's doubts. Setting. Alexander's home. Action. Sophia confronts Alexander, questioning his obsession with destroying Marcus. This creates friction in their marriage. Cause and effect. Alexander's personal life begins to unravel, foreshadowing his impending downfall. Setting. Corporate boardroom. Action. Marcus finalizes a major deal that undercuts one of Alexander's core businesses, sending shockwaves through the industry. Cause and effect. This move puts Marcus on top and marks the beginning of Alexander's collapse. Setting. Marcus's office. Action. Marcus receives an invitation to meet Alexander privately, signaling a direct confrontation. Cause and effect. This sets up the high-stakes confrontation between the two rivals, leading into the final chapter. Setting. Private lounge at one of Alexander's hotels. Action. Marcus and Alexander meet face to face. Alexander tries to regain control, but Marcus remains calm, revealing his strategic victories. Cause and effect. The tension builds as Alexander realizes Marcus has outmaneuvered him. Setting. Same location. Action. Instead of revenge, Marcus offers Alexander a surprising proposition, a chance to partner and rebuild. Alexander, blindsided, grapples with this unexpected offer. Cause and effect. Marcus's moral choice brings the conflict to an emotional climax, challenging Alexander's beliefs about power. Setting. Alexander's home. Action. Alexander, now humbled, discusses the offer with Sophia. She encourages him to accept, but Alexander struggles with the idea of working with Marcus. Cause and effect. Alexander's internal struggle shows his transformation, setting up the resolution of the story. Setting. Marcus's home. Action. Marcus reflects on how far he's come. Camila congratulates him on his decision to offer peace instead of revenge, highlighting his growth. Cause and effect. Marcus's emotional journey comes full circle, showing that true success is not just about power, but integrity. Setting. Joint press conference. Action. Marcus and Alexander announce a new partnership, signaling a shift in both their lives. Alexander publicly acknowledges Marcus's achievements, and the novel closes with Marcus standing at the height of his power, but with newfound wisdom. Cause and effect. The story ends on a note of redemption and growth, with Marcus not only winning the power struggle but also choosing a path of reconciliation. Marcus Silva sat at his expansive desk, the panoramic view of the city skyline behind him. His office was sleek, modern, and a testament to the empire he had built from nothing. It was a moment of quiet after a long day when his assistant, Laura, knocked softly and stepped in. "Marcus, this came for you," she said, placing a pristine envelope on his desk. The paper felt expensive between his fingers. He opened it slowly, revealing an invitation to one of the most prestigious events of the year, the Duarte Gala. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly as he read the host's name, Alexander Duarte. A familiar knot of tension formed in his chest. "I assume you're not going?" Laura asked, noticing his hesitation. "I'm not sure yet," Marcus replied, leaning back in his chair. He had never been fond of the elitist events the old money crowd loved to throw. They saw him as an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their world of wealth and privilege. And Duarte represented everything Marcus had fought against. That evening, Marcus sat with his younger sister, Camila, in his spacious living room. She was always the one to push him forward when he hesitated. "You're going," she declared, crossing her arms. "Why? So I can stand in the corner while they pretend I don't exist?" "You're Marcus Silva, the founder of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country," Camila reminded him. "You've earned your place in that room. Besides, it's not just about them. This could be an opportunity." Marcus looked at her, taking in her determined expression. She had a point. He wasn't the kid from the rundown neighborhood anymore. He had worked too hard to be dismissed now. "Fine," he sighed. "I'll go." The night of the gala arrived, and Marcus stood in front of the towering Duarte Hotel, its glittering lights reflecting off the polished marble steps. Inside, the ballroom was even more opulent than he had imagined. Chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting a soft glow over the sea of expensive gowns and tailored suits. Marcus adjusted his cufflinks, scanning the room as he entered. Immediately, he felt the stares. Subtle, but present. People noticed him, but no one approached. He was a known name, but not one they respected in the same way they did those born into wealth. Camila, standing beside him in an elegant dress, whispered, "Ignore them." He nodded, though the tension didn't leave his shoulders. He spotted Alexander Duarte across the room, surrounded by people. The man was tall, with an air of arrogance that filled the space around him. Marcus's jaw tightened, remembering all the stories he had heard about Alexander. Stories of his cutthroat business tactics and disdain for anyone outside his circle. Marcus's unease grew, but he forced himself to approach the bar. This was just another room, another event. He'd faced worse before. Scene 3. The encounter with Alexander. As Marcus waited for his drink, he felt a presence beside him. Alexander Duarte, in all his polished glory, had appeared. The room seemed to hush around them. "Marcus Silva, isn't it?" Alexander's voice was smooth, but there was a cold edge to it. He extended his hand, and Marcus shook it, feeling the slight condescension in his grip. "That's right," Marcus replied, keeping his tone neutral. "I've heard a lot about you. Quite the success story." "From nothing to this," Alexander said, gesturing vaguely, as if Marcus's achievements were an afterthought. Marcus smiled tightly. "I've worked hard for it." "Oh, I'm sure you have," Alexander said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "But, success doesn't always equate to class, does it?" A few people nearby chuckled softly. The jab was sharp, and Marcus felt the sting immediately. He wanted to respond, to fire back, but the weight of the eyes on him held him in place. Alexander's smirk deepened, satisfied with his audience's reaction. Marcus gripped his glass tightly. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in around him. He had known this world would never fully accept him, but the humiliation was raw, and it cut deeper than he expected. As they left the gala, the night air was cold and biting. Marcus walked in silence toward his car, Camilla beside him. "He's an ass," she said bluntly, breaking the silence. "You don't need to take that." Marcus remained quiet, his jaw clenched. "Marcus, you're better than him. You know that, right?" He opened the car door, but before getting in, he looked at his sister. "Am I, though? Because tonight, it felt like I'm still the outsider, the kid from the neighborhood who doesn't belong." Camilla's eyes softened. "You're not that kid anymore. You've built something incredible, and that scares people like him. He'll always try to tear you down, but you're stronger than that." Marcus sighed and got into the car. Her words were comforting, but the knot in his chest hadn't loosened. The memory of Alexander's smirk, the laughter of those around him, kept replaying in his mind. As they drove home, the city lights blurred past the window. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy, the old doubts creeping back in. But underneath that, something else simmered: anger. Later that night, Marcus sat in his home office, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of his laptop screen. He couldn't sleep. Alexander's words echoed in his mind, but now they fueled something more than hurt. He pulled up a file on his computer, research on Alexander Duarte's business empire. He had looked into it before, out of curiosity, but now he studied it with a different purpose. There were cracks in Duarte's foundation, small vulnerabilities that Marcus had noticed in passing. His eyes scanned the data, a plan forming in his mind. If Alexander wanted to treat him like he was insignificant, then Marcus would show him just how wrong he was. But this wouldn't be a hasty move. Marcus knew better than that. This would take time, precision. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. His success had always been about more than proving others wrong, but tonight had changed something in him. The humiliation he had felt wasn't just personal. It was a reflection of the system that had tried to keep him down his entire life. "I'm going to change the game," Marcus muttered to himself. As the clock ticked past midnight, Marcus began drafting plans to accelerate his company's latest project, one that would not only cement his place at the top of the tech world, but also give him the leverage he needed to strike back at Alexander Duarte. The decision was made. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving that no one could define his worth but himself. The lights of the city continued to shine outside his window, but inside, Marcus was already looking beyond them, toward the next step in his rise to power. The day after the gala, Marcus Silva strode into his sleek, glass-walled office, determination carved into his expression. The humiliation from the previous night still echoed in his mind, but it no longer hurt. Instead, it fueled him. His assistant, Laura, greeted him with a knowing look, sensing the urgency in his steps. "Gather the team," Marcus said briskly. "We need to move faster." Within the hour, Marcus's senior development team filled the conference room, a mix of engineers, designers, and project leads. They all knew about the tech project they were working on, a product that, if launched successfully, would revolutionize communication across the globe. The project was ahead of its time, but Marcus had decided that ahead of its time wasn't good enough. It had to be now. Standing at the head of the table, Marcus scanned the room, his eyes landing on each team member. "We're accelerating the timeline. I want this product ready for launch in 6 months, not 12. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. One of the engineers, a seasoned developer named Ethan, raised his hand. "That's ambitious. We're still refining the tech." Marcus nodded. "I know. And I know you all are capable of making it happen. We need to push boundaries. Resources aren't an issue. I'll double the team if needed." The tension in the room shifted. Everyone understood the gravity of what Marcus was asking, but they also knew him well enough to trust his judgment. He wasn't asking for miracles. He was asking for their best, and they wanted to give it to him. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus stood by the window, watching as the team dispersed, already discussing strategies to meet the new deadline. The wheels were in motion, and now he had set the stage for his rise. Later that week, Marcus found himself sitting in the high-backed leather chair of a private investor's office, one of the most powerful financial moguls in the city. John Carlyle, a man in his early 60s with silver hair and a calculating gaze, was one of the few who could provide Marcus with the influx of capital he needed to scale his tech company at the speed he envisioned. Carlyle leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus as if weighing his every word. "You're asking for a significant amount of funding, Marcus. What makes you so sure you'll deliver on this accelerated timeline?" Marcus held his gaze, unfazed. "Because I know what's at stake, and I have the team to do it. We're not just launching a product. We're about to change the way people communicate, the way businesses operate. This will put us ahead of every competitor for years." Carlyle's lips curled into a slight smile. "I've heard that before. Many times. I'm not like everyone else," Marcus said calmly. "You know my track record. This isn't just about money for me. It's personal." There was a beat of silence before Carlyle leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Marcus's. "I believe you, but personal motives can cloud judgment. I trust you'll stay focused on the bottom line." "I'm always focused on the bottom line," Marcus replied, a hint of steel in his voice. Carlyle nodded, satisfied. "You'll have your funding." Marcus left the office with a sense of satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place. With the additional capital, he could expand operations, hire more developers, and secure the infrastructure needed to dominate the market. Alexander Duarte didn't know it yet, but his empire was about to be challenged from an angle he couldn't have predicted. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, a glass of whiskey in his hand, as he reviewed the latest projections for the project. Across from him, Camila watched him carefully. She could tell something had shifted in her brother since the gala. His drive had always been there, but now there was something more, something darker. "Marcus, you're pushing hard," Camila said, her voice tinged with concern. "I have to," he replied, not looking up from the screen. "But why? You've already made it. You've built something incredible. Why do you need to accelerate this project?" He sighed, setting down his glass and finally meeting her gaze. "It's not just about the project. It's about what happened at the gala." Camila frowned. "Alexander Duarte? Marcus, that man's a joke. You don't have to prove anything to him." "It's not about proving anything to him," Marcus said, his voice steady but intense. "It's about proving something to myself. I'm tired of being seen as an outsider. This project, this company, it's my way of showing them all that I belong here. And I'm not going to let anyone, especially someone like Alexander, belittle what I've worked for." Camila sat back, her concern deepening. "I get it, Marcus. I do. But don't let your drive for revenge consume you. You're better than that." He appreciated her concern, but Marcus couldn't let it slow him down. He was on a path now, and there was no turning back. "I know what I'm doing, Camila." She sighed but didn't press the issue further. She knew her brother well enough to recognize when his mind was set. 2 months later, Marcus stood at the front of a packed auditorium at a major tech conference, the lights dimmed except for the spotlight illuminating him. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone in the industry knew Marcus Silva, and they knew he was on the verge of revealing something big. The massive screen behind him flickered to life, showcasing the sleek interface of his new communication platform. It was more than just an app. It was a revolutionary system that integrated advanced AI with real-time data processing, enabling businesses and individuals to communicate seamlessly across the globe. As Marcus walked the audience through the demo, the room buzzed with excitement. By the time he finished, the applause was deafening. Tech journalists were already tweeting about the next big thing, and major corporations were lining up to get in on the ground floor. Marcus smiled, shaking hands and fielding questions as the conference wrapped up. But behind his confident exterior, he knew this was just the beginning. His product was going to disrupt the market, and that meant one thing: Alexander Duarte would soon be paying attention. A few days later, in a towering corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Alexander Duarte sat at his desk, frowning as he scrolled through news reports on Marcus Silva's latest product launch. It was making waves in the industry, and the implications were clear. Marcus's company was on the rise, and fast. Alexander tossed the tablet onto his desk, leaning back in his leather chair with a scowl. He had never taken Marcus seriously before. Sure, the man was successful, but he wasn't part of their world. And yet, here he was, making headlines and threatening to upend entire industries. Do you want us to look into it? His assistant asked, standing by the door. Alexander waved a hand dismissively. Monitor the situation, but don't overreact. This is just a blip. He doesn't have the reach we do. But even as he said the words, Alexander couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he might be underestimating Marcus Silva. And underestimating people had never served him well in the past. As the assistant left the office, Alexander stared out the window, the city skyline stretching before him. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of unease. Marcus Silva wasn't just some upstart tech entrepreneur anymore. He was a rival. And rivals had to be dealt with. Marcus sat in his office, the city's skyline a blur through the window as the sun set behind him. His thoughts were focused, calculating. The recent success of his tech product launch had placed him in a powerful position, but he knew this was only the beginning. If he wanted to truly challenge Alexander Duarte, he needed to diversify his empire. Leaning forward, Marcus studied a series of financial reports and acquisition targets. He had been quietly observing Alexander's hotel business for months. While it looked invincible from the outside, Marcus had identified vulnerabilities in the supply chain and key partnerships. He picked up his phone and dialed the number of his lead financial advisor. "I want to move forward with the acquisition of that boutique hotel chain," Marcus said. "Let's finalize the offer by the end of the week." His advisor hesitated. "Are you sure about this, Marcus? It's a big move, and Duarte will take notice." "That's the point," Marcus replied coolly. "We're not just playing in the tech space anymore. It's time to hit him where it hurts." As he hung up the phone, Marcus felt a sense of purpose building within him. This was more than business. It was about proving that he could stand on equal ground with the elite who had tried to keep him down. The wheels were now in motion for his next move, and soon, Alexander Duarte would realize that his empire wasn't as untouchable as he thought. Across town, in the lavish office of his luxury hotel, Alexander Duarte was seething. His assistant had just delivered the news. Marcus Silva was making a move into the hotel industry. Alexander had dismissed Marcus before, seeing him as nothing more than a tech upstart, but now it was clear that Marcus had bigger ambitions. "How dare he?" Alexander muttered, pacing the room. He had built his hotel empire from the ground up, and the idea of someone like Marcus challenging him in his own territory was infuriating. "Sir," his assistant said cautiously, "there's more. Silva's tech product is gaining market share rapidly, and it's attracting major investors. His company is positioned to expand globally." Alexander slammed his fist on the desk. "I want a full report on Silva's operations. Every deal he's made, every partnership. I don't care how much it costs. Find me something to use against him." His assistant nodded and quickly left the room, leaving Alexander alone with his thoughts. He had always prided himself on being one step ahead of his competitors, but Marcus had blindsided him. It was time to strike back. As he sat down, Alexander began to craft a plan. He had contacts in the media, people who owed him favors. If he couldn't stop Marcus through business, he would attack his reputation. A smear campaign, carefully orchestrated, could damage Marcus's public image and create doubt among his investors. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was personal. And Alexander wasn't going to let Marcus Silva get away with challenging him. The smear campaign hit fast. Within days, articles began circulating online, questioning the legitimacy of Marcus's business practices. Anonymous sources accused his company of unethical behavior, and rumors of financial mismanagement spread like wildfire. Marcus watched the headlines appear on his phone with a grim expression. He had anticipated that Alexander would retaliate, but the speed and intensity of the attack were startling. Camila sat across from him in his office, reading one of the articles. "This is disgusting. He's trying to ruin you." "I know," Marcus replied, his voice calm but tense, "but I'm not going to let him win." Later that day, Marcus held a press conference at his company's headquarters. The room was packed with reporters, eager to hear how he would respond to the growing scandal. As the cameras clicked and the crowd murmured, Marcus stood at the podium, exuding quiet confidence. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady. "Over the past few days, there have been allegations made against my company that are not only false but malicious. I want to be clear. I stand by the integrity of my business and the people who work for me. He paused, letting his words sink in. These attacks are not based on facts, but on fear. Fear of competition, fear of change, and fear of those who refuse to be silenced by the status quo. I won't be intimidated by baseless accusations, and I will continue to focus on the work that has brought us this far. The room was silent for a moment, then the sound of applause filled the space. The reporters scrambled to ask questions, but Marcus had already said what needed to be said. As he left the stage, he knew that his public statement had been effective. The smear campaign might have cast doubt on some, but he had reinforced his position with grace and strength. Alexander Duarte's attempt to tear him down had backfired. Meanwhile, back at the Duarte estate, Alexander's victory was short-lived. The smear campaign hadn't crippled Marcus's company the way he had hoped, and now he was facing pressure from an unexpected source, his investors. Sitting in his expansive living room, Alexander fielded a tense call from the board members of his hotel chain. They had caught wind of Marcus's acquisition and were concerned about the competition. "Alexander, we need to talk about your strategy," one of the board members said, his voice sharp. "This smear campaign is drawing more attention to Silva's company, and it's not reflecting well on us. We're hearing from clients who are starting to question our ethics." Alexander clenched his jaw. "It's a temporary setback. I have everything under control." "Do you?" another board member interjected. "Because from where we're sitting, Silva's business is gaining traction, and you're reacting emotionally. We need a clear plan moving forward." The call ended, leaving Alexander simmering with anger. Even his investors were starting to question him. Worse yet, Sophia, his wife, had begun to express doubts of her own. Later that night, as they sat at the dinner table, Sophia broke the silence. "Alexander, this feud with Marcus Silva, it's consuming you." He looked at her, his eyes flashing. "He's trying to destroy everything I've built." Sophia sighed. "Maybe it's time to let it go. Focus on your business, not on tearing him down. This obsession is going to hurt you more than him." Alexander didn't respond, but her words lingered in his mind long after the conversation ended. For the first time, he felt the weight of the pressure bearing down on him from all sides. As Marcus sat in his quiet office late that night, the world outside was dark and still. His public statement had been a success, and his company was weathering the storm. But something was gnawing at him. He stared at the acquisition reports on his desk. His plan to challenge Alexander had worked, but Camila's words echoed in his mind. "Don't let your drive for revenge consume you." Marcus knew that this wasn't just about business anymore. The humiliation at the gala, Alexander's smear campaign, it had all become personal. But was he letting that personal vendetta cloud his judgment? Camila entered his office, noticing the look of deep contemplation on his face. "You did great today," she said, sitting beside him. "Thanks," Marcus replied, though his tone was distant. She studied him for a moment. "You're thinking about what I said, aren't you?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I'm at a crossroads, Camila. I want to beat him, to show him that I'm not someone he can push around. But at what cost?" Camila placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've already won, Marcus. Look at everything you've built. You don't need to destroy Alexander to prove your worth." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's hard to let go of the anger. It's been driving me for so long." "I know," she said softly, "but you're better than this. You don't need to be like him." As the night stretched on, Marcus sat in silence, wrestling with the decision before him. He could continue down this path of revenge, or he could rise above it and focus on the future he had always dreamed of. Marcus Silva sat in a high-end restaurant, the low murmur of conversations and the clink of cutlery creating a soothing background as he waited for his guests to arrive. Today was pivotal. He had been quietly working to forge a strategic alliance with one of the most powerful moguls in the business world, Robert Caldwell. Caldwell's influence extended beyond the tech industry, with investments in infrastructure and global supply chains. This partnership would take Marcus's reach to the next level. When Caldwell arrived, he was a man in his late 50s with a reputation for calculated decisions and cold efficiency. He slid into the chair opposite Marcus, his expression unreadable. "I hear you've made quite the name for yourself recently," Caldwell said, his voice measured. And you've ruffled some feathers, particularly Alexander Duarte's. Marcus smiled slightly. Ruffling feathers isn't the goal. Changing the game is. Caldwell leaned back, studying Marcus carefully. I like that. I've seen how fast you've grown. It's impressive. But why do you want me as a partner? Because with your infrastructure and global connections, we could take what I've built and scale it to a level neither of us could reach alone. Duarte's been on top of this sector for too long, but his business is stuck in the past. Together, we can change that. The two men exchanged ideas for hours, discussing potential ventures and mutual benefits. By the end of the meeting, Marcus had secured a powerful ally. Caldwell's support would give him the leverage he needed to accelerate his expansion and start cornering more of Alexander's market. As Marcus left the restaurant, he felt the momentum shifting. The tides were turning, and he was now in a position to rival Alexander not just in tech, but across industries. Meanwhile, in the pristine office of Duarte Enterprises, Alexander sat at his desk, staring at the latest financial reports. His fingers drummed anxiously against the polished wood. His empire was still strong, but cracks were beginning to show. Marcus's expansion into the hotel industry, combined with his tech success, was starting to impact key revenue streams. Sir, we're starting to see clients pull away from some of our partnerships, his assistant informed him hesitantly. Several companies have started aligning with Silva's ventures, especially after his new partnership with Caldwell. Alexander's eyes narrowed. Caldwell? That was a blow he hadn't expected. Caldwell's global reach meant Marcus now had access to supply chains, infrastructure, and resources Alexander had spent years building. Damn him, Alexander muttered under his breath. His usual confidence was wavering, replaced by a growing sense of desperation. He had underestimated Marcus's tenacity, and now his own empire was at risk. He rose abruptly from his desk and paced the office. We need to do something. Silva's expansion has to be stopped. I don't care how. Make sure every venture he starts faces obstacles. Regulations, lawsuits, media scrutiny. I want pressure on him from every direction. His assistant nodded, but there was hesitation in her voice. Sir, we've already tried to discredit him, and it didn't work. If we push too hard, it could backfire. Alexander turned sharply. I don't care. Just do it. As she left the office, Alexander sank into his chair, his mind racing. The empire he had built over decades was beginning to falter, and his desperation was growing with every day that Marcus Silva rose higher. That evening, at home, Alexander's frustration spilled over into his personal life. Sophia, his wife, had noticed the change in him. The confidence and arrogance that had once defined Alexander had given way to agitation and obsession. She watched as he pored over financial documents at the dinner table, his food untouched. Alexander, can we talk? Sophia asked, her voice soft but firm. He looked up briefly, barely acknowledging her. This thing with Marcus Silva, it's consuming you. You're not the same man you were when we first built this empire. Alexander didn't respond, his eyes still scanning the reports. Sophia continued, undeterred. I'm serious. You've always been ambitious, but this isn't about ambition anymore. It's personal, and it's destroying you. He finally set the papers down, his eyes flashing with irritation. What do you expect me to do, Sophia? Sit back and watch as some upstart tech guy dismantles everything we've built? No, she replied calmly. I expect you to be smarter. You've always been ahead of your competitors because you were strategic, not emotional. But this obsession with Silva is clouding your judgment. Her words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment, Alexander said nothing, the truth of what she was saying sinking in. If you keep this up, you're going to lose everything, Sophia warned. Not because Marcus is better than you, but because you're letting your anger blind you. Alexander leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The tension between him and Sophia had been growing for months, but now it felt like his entire world was unraveling. He didn't want to admit it, but Sophia was right. His focus on destroying Marcus was eroding his control over his own empire. A few days later, in a corporate boardroom filled with top executives, Marcus Silva stood at the head of the table. The deal he had been working toward for months was finally coming to fruition. His acquisition of one of Alexander's core businesses, a boutique hotel chain, was almost complete. This was the move that would send shockwaves through the industry. As of this moment, Marcus said, signing the final document, we officially own one of Duarte's key assets. There was a round of applause from his team, but Marcus remained composed. He knew this wasn't just a business win. It was a strategic victory that would cripple Alexander's hold on the market. As the meeting wrapped up, Marcus took a moment to reflect. He had come so far from the man who had been humiliated at the gala. Now, he was in a position of power, dictating the terms of the industry. But there was still a part of him that felt unsettled. Was this truly the victory he had been chasing all along? Back in his office, Marcus gazed out at the city skyline, wondering what the next move would be. He had won the battle, but something deeper was stirring within him. It was no longer just about beating Alexander. There was a choice ahead, one that would define not just his career, but the legacy he left behind. A week later, Marcus sat in his office reviewing financial projections when his assistant walked in, holding an envelope. "This just arrived," she said, handing it to him. Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out an elegant card. It was an invitation from Alexander Duarte. The message was simple: "We need to talk. Meet me at the Duarte Hotel, tomorrow at 8 p.m. Marcus's brow furrowed as he read the words. This was it, the direct confrontation he had anticipated for so long. The invitation was unexpected, but not surprising. Alexander must have realized that his empire was crumbling and was reaching out to salvage what he could. As Marcus set the card down, he considered his options. The power had shifted, and for the first time, Alexander was the one extending the olive branch. But what would Marcus do? Was this the moment to crush his rival completely, or was there another path? One that could lead to something more meaningful than revenge? The question lingered in his mind as he prepared for the meeting. Tomorrow would change everything. Marcus Silva entered the private lounge of the Duarte Hotel, a place that exuded the same opulence as its owner. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and rich mahogany walls gave the room an air of exclusivity. The irony of meeting Alexander Duarte here, in a space so similar to the one where he had been humiliated months ago, was not lost on Marcus. But this time, things were different. This time, he was in control. Alexander was already seated, a glass of whiskey in hand, his face lined with tension. He looked up as Marcus approached, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Marcus," Alexander greeted, gesturing to the seat opposite him. "Thank you for coming." Marcus sat down, maintaining his calm demeanor. "You wanted to talk." There was a brief pause as Alexander shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. The man who had once exuded arrogance now seemed vulnerable. His empire was crumbling, and he knew it. "I've been thinking about the way things have unfolded between us," Alexander began, choosing his words carefully. "We've both made moves. But this feud, it's cost us both." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "Has it cost me? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like I've only gained." The tension in the room was palpable. Alexander's jaw tightened, but he forced a nod. "You're right. You've outmaneuvered me. But this doesn't have to end with one of us destroying the other." Marcus raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" Alexander took a deep breath, clearly swallowing his pride. "We both know that your rise has shifted the balance of power. But instead of continuing this fight, I'm proposing something different. A partnership." Marcus stared at him, the words hanging in the air. A partnership? After everything that had happened? It wasn't what he had expected. He had anticipated a desperate plea or perhaps one final attempt to undermine him, but not this. "And why would I want to partner with you?" Marcus asked, his voice steady. "You've spent months trying to tear me down." "Because we're stronger together," Alexander replied, his voice tinged with desperation. "I've built an empire, and you've built one of your own. If we combine forces, we could dominate multiple industries. You know as well as I do that the business world thrives on collaboration, not just competition." Marcus remained silent, his mind racing. The idea of partnering with Alexander was unexpected, but it wasn't without merit. Together, they could become an unstoppable force. But was it worth it? For a moment, Marcus considered walking away. After all, he had the upper hand. He could continue dismantling Alexander's empire, taking what was left piece by piece until there was nothing. But then, something shifted inside him. This entire journey had started with a moment of humiliation, a desire for revenge. But now, sitting across from Alexander, Marcus realized that he had already won in every way that mattered. The power struggle, the battles, it was all behind him. What lay ahead was a choice between destruction and something more meaningful. "I'm not interested in just dominating industries, Alexander," Marcus said slowly. "If we're going to do this, it needs to be about more than just money and power." Alexander looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Marcus leaned back, his gaze steady. "I built my company from the ground up, not just to prove myself, but to create something lasting, something that benefits people. If we're going to partner, I need to know that you're committed to that same vision." Alexander's eyes widened slightly, as if the idea of using power for something other than personal gain was foreign to him. I can agree to that," he said, though there was hesitation in his voice. Marcus saw the uncertainty in Alexander's eyes. This was a man who had never been challenged in this way, a man who had always focused on his own ambition. But now, Marcus was offering him a different path. "If we do this," Marcus continued, "we're going to rebuild, better, more responsibly. We'll create opportunities for people who have been overlooked, like I once was. That's the only way this works." Alexander sat back, his mind racing. He hadn't expected this conversation to take such a turn, but he was in no position to argue. His empire was collapsing, and Marcus was offering him a lifeline. "All right," Alexander said, his voice resigned. "We'll do it your way." Later that evening, Alexander returned to his penthouse, his mind still reeling from the conversation with Marcus. Sophia was waiting for him, her arms crossed as she watched him enter the room. "Well?" she asked, her voice laced with curiosity. "How did it go?" Alexander poured himself a drink, taking a long sip before answering. "He's willing to partner, but on his terms." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "And what are those terms?" "He wants to rebuild, to focus on something more than just profit," Alexander said, the words sounding foreign to him. "He's asking for a commitment to creating opportunities for people who've been overlooked." Sophia's expression softened. "That sounds like the Marcus Silva I've read about." Alexander shook his head. "It's not what I expected." Sophia moved closer, placing a hand on his arm. "Maybe that's a good thing. You've spent years focused on your own ambition, tearing others down to stay on top. But maybe it's time for something different. Maybe it's time to build something that lasts." Alexander stared at her, his mind grappling with the idea. Could he really change? Could he let go of the arrogance and pride that had defined his career? "I don't know if I can do this," Alexander admitted quietly. Sophia smiled softly. "You don't have to do it alone." For the first time in years, Alexander felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this partnership with Marcus could be the fresh start he needed. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his own home, reflecting on the day's events. The deal with Alexander was unexpected, but it felt right. He had spent so much time chasing power, driven by anger and a desire to prove himself. But now, he realized that true success wasn't just about defeating your enemies. It was about what you did with your power once you had it. Camila entered the room, a cup of tea in hand. "You look deep in thought," she said, sitting beside him. Marcus smiled slightly. "It's been a long journey." Camila nodded, sensing the shift in him. "And now you're at the top." "I am," Marcus agreed. "But it's not about being on top anymore. It's about using what I've built to make a difference." She smiled, pride evident in her eyes. "I knew you'd get here, Marcus. Not just to the top, but to this realization. You've always been driven by more than just ambition." Marcus leaned back, taking a deep breath. "It's strange, Camila. I spent so long chasing revenge, and now that I've had the chance to take it, I don't want it anymore." "That's because you're better than that," she said softly. "You've always been better." Marcus looked out the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance. He had come so far from the man who had been humiliated at the gala, and now he stood at the height of his power. But more importantly, he stood with integrity. The next morning, the The press gathered at the Duarte Hotel for an unexpected announcement. Reporters whispered among themselves, speculating about what was about to unfold. As the cameras clicked and the microphones were set up, Marcus Silva and Alexander Duarte took the stage together. "Thank you all for being here today," Marcus began, his voice calm and composed. "We're here to announce something that may come as a surprise to many of you." Alexander took a deep breath before stepping forward. "Over the past few months, Marcus Silva and I have been competitors, but today, we stand before you as partners." The room erupted in whispers, the shock palpable. "We've come to realize that our combined efforts can achieve something far greater than what we could accomplish alone," Marcus continued. "This partnership isn't just about business. It's about creating opportunities, rebuilding industries, and giving back to the communities that have supported us." Alexander nodded, his voice steady. "Together, we're committed to building something that lasts, something that goes beyond wealth and power." As the press conference continued, the air was filled with the sense that a new chapter was beginning, not just for Marcus and Alexander, but for the industries they represented. The rivalry that had once driven them apart had now become the foundation for something greater. As Marcus left the stage, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had won the power struggle, but more importantly, he had chosen a path of reconciliation. And in doing so, he had proven that true power wasn't about destruction. It was about building something that could endure.